So we've been watching a show on Netflix. It's called The Fiery Priest. Now, Young Mi Kang, you have to take responsibility for this. Normally, my wife doesn't really watch much TV. She's not really all that interested, but she's been hooked up on the show, and she can't seem to pull herself away from it. So suddenly, I find myself as being the voice of restraint within our household, and that's cause for concern for me. But anyway, it's a show about this priest who is uncovering corruption at the very highest levels. All the city officials and district and provincial officials are all corrupt, and they're involved in all this embezzlement and murder. And he's determined that he's going to expose it. Now, he's quite a striking figure. The main priest, he's this tall, really good-looking Korean guy, and he's dressed all in these black flowing robes, and he's out there just like beating up the bad guys, and it's quite a striking and appealing figure. I kind of get how this show hooks us all in, because despite what we know as Jesus being a nonviolent resistor, we're still drawn to this idea of rough justice, right? Of administering justice in the name of the Lord. So the show actually kind of draws us in. Now, one of the things that I quite like about the show is that out of the cast of characters, most of the protagonists, the good people, they all have some very surprising backstories. So the two priests and the nun, who are the central religious figures, they both have histories that are certainly not what we would expect from somebody who's holy, who's ministering to other people. And in itself, that is a comforting and encouraging message, that no matter what we've done in the past, we can still be called to become God's servants. That there's nothing that we've done that strikes us out from being part of the kingdom of God. And what's more, we can not only be part of the family of God, but we can be leaders within that family. We can be the ones who proclaim God's message and are set apart as holy. So that's a rather encouraging message, and it's nice to hear. But I find the show actually goes beyond that. So within the show, not only do these people have some kind of sketchy past, they're also called upon to draw upon these skills from their former life and use them for the furthering of justice. So they're taking what was previously bad and used for selfish or self-serving or even evil purposes, at the very less vain purposes. And now they're being tasked with turning these same skills towards service of God. And it's a very interesting idea, because what that tells us is that redemption is not just a simple erasure of the past and beginning again. So that the new creation can't simply be that from this moment of conversion, that everything here is just wiped away and we start again as some kind of newborn babe, and we start to live holy lives. Because if we have that kind of a theology, we lose any kind of continuity of identity. We actually have to sacrifice the self, and then we have to wonder, well, what's being saved? If I'm just an entirely new creation and old Michael is just gone, then that's an odd view of redemption. Essentially, what that would mean, if we just simply erase the past, is that everything that I've done up until this point becomes meaningless, purposeless, just vanity, just void, just nothing. And that's not redemption. That's really more akin to the flood, right? Of God just wiping the earth clean. And God said that he wouldn't do that again. So there's something more to redemption. There has to be this old has to survive into the new. There has to be a survival of self, but still transformation occurs. And that's actually what we see within this show. So redemption is not a simple erasure of the past, but in fact it's a reorienting, it's a redirecting, it's a repurposing. So these characters have taken their old skills and they reorient them. They use them in service of God rather than service of self. And we actually see this in the Bible as well too. If we think about Saul in Acts in the New Testament, Saul was bullheaded, he was zealous, he was determined, he was full of righteous anger, and he was persecuting the church. He was throwing folks in jail and beating them and doing all kinds of terrible things. And he had a moment of conversion. Jesus appeared to him, spoke to him, and something fundamental shifted within Saul. And he changed so much, in fact, that his name had to change as well, too, that he became Paul instead of Saul. But when we look at this new character, Paul, we see a lot of the old character still in him. He's still zealous. He's still bullheaded. He's still determined. He's still absolutely convinced that he is absolutely right. So the old Saul survives within the new Paul, but it's reoriented. So now he's in obedience to God instead of in opposition to God. And so this idea of redemption as a reorientation, we see it in this show, we see it in the Bible, and truth be told, we see it within our own lives. Now, there's one line in the show that quite jumped out at me. And it jumped out at me because I had the same saying on a coffee cup. And certainly we know that if it's printed on a coffee cup, it's got to be good theology. And the line is this: every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. And what that means is that none of us are so pure and so holy that we can be sure of ourselves and arrogant. It also means that none of us are so bad that we're beyond redemption and that our life story is over. And it also speaks to this integration of the old self and the new self, and that continuity between the old and the new, that we go from somebody who is outside of God's family, and we're transformed as we become part of God's family, and yet we are still us. And essentially, I guess all this just sort of sums up the fact that God works to the good in all things. He takes what was previously misdirected and directs it to good ends. This is our God who brings good out of evil, who brings life out of death, the Easter God.